Well, I think one of the most special things about Grammar for Business is the fact that we used a very large database of language to help us to find out what exactly to put into the book. This database was both spoken and written business language, and it was from a very, very broad range of contexts. So the written language came from newspapers and magazines, and the spoken language came from lots of business contexts. So situations like presentations, meetings, and many other business events. There was a great mix of people, there was a mix of topics, and it was all in real life situations. So by studying the grammar of what these people actually said in these real life situations, we knew exactly which language would help learners in their business situations. Well, the corpus really helped us to identify what were the most frequent structures, pieces of grammar, vocabulary. And with the corpus, we were able to see exactly which words are most likely to be used in business contexts. So, for example, if you're thinking about say verbs with the infinitive or ing form, we knew which were the most frequent. If you're thinking about comparatives, which are obviously very common in business contexts, something like you'd know whether people were more likely to say less important than or not as important as, which is the most common, farther or further, typical problem, and so on. There are many, many examples like this. So we use the corpus to help us to know exactly which items of language to include, and the corpus also helped us to think about exactly which context to use for the practice activities. Well, of course, business grammar and general English grammar in many ways are very similar, but the corpus informed us, gave us some really useful information of how business grammar is actually different from general English grammar. I'd like to give you one example that's very common, and that is when in business context people give instructions or ask people to do things. In business grammar, it's so much more common for somebody to say something like, we need the email to go out today. And what they're really saying is, you've got to do this. Okay, it's a very, very common thing. And that use of we to try and make people feel, we're in this together. It's not me above you or something like that. That's very common. And another very typical example in business English is verbs which normally take an object, so transitive verbs. And a good example that I could give you is it would be normal in general English to say things like, we need to launch the product next week. That would be the general English version. In business English, it would be very much more common to say, we need to launch next week. And everybody would know that that object is not necessary. Okay. Another verb that does the same thing is delay. We need to delay the contract, for example, general English, whereas we need to delay would be more common in business English. And there are quite a lot of other verbs that do the same thing. Well, spoken grammar includes all sorts of features, and one of these is ellipsis. In other words, leaving out certain words. And very commonly we leave out pronouns or auxiliary verbs. So I'm sure you can imagine within a business context, it would be very common to hear someone saying to their colleague, you ready? Or ready? Very common. So we thought it was very, very important for students to be aware of these kind of features of spoken English. In addition to this, we've also got sections which are called speaking strategies. And these parts of the unit focus particularly on the grammar and the vocabulary, which will help students to become better at managing conversations. So they have features like helping students to know how to start conversations, how to finish conversations. If they want to change topic, how do they do that? If they want to be more direct, if they want to be less direct. So lots and lots of different strategies that help them to become better at speaking. So what we wanted to do was to remind the learner that if you're going to be very good at business, it's not enough just to know your product or to have very good systems. You also need to be able to interact very well. And by using the kind of strategies that we're giving them in the book, then we're hoping that that's what learners will be able to do much more successfully. Well, first and foremost, I think you really need to listen to what people say. You've got to listen to everyday conversations, pick up the kind of expressions that they use, and then imitate them, copy them, record them, write them down, do whatever works for you so that it will help you to remember them. And if you can remember these kinds of expressions and these chunks of language, then basically it's going to help you so much in business contexts. You'll be able to create and to expand on relationships that you have, both with your colleagues and with your clients. And that's why it's really so important to know what people really say in business language.